Welcome to Wrasslin Raw!
All right, you're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when Raw became war and Attitude ruled. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Oklahoma is not the South. It's like some bizarro world over there.
Joe Giammatteo.
If it wasn't for Sable, Marc Mero couldn't make a living anywhere.
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history, one episode of Raw is War at a time. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on October 6th, 1997. This Raw was recorded at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri, and features Vince McMahon, Jim Ross, and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then, let's get into it. We started this off with Vince announcing Brian Pillman's death, emphasizing "found dead" in the first line of his speech, letting everyone know they would be doing the 10-bell salute and asking the crowd for silence out of respect. Members of the crowd were having a hard time adhering to the silence during the 10 bells. Kind of irritated me because, shut the fuck up.
How hard is that?
Yeah, 10 bells, doesn't take long. But once that shit was out of the way, Shawn Michaels came out with Triple H and Chyna. Chyna was looking amazing, by the way, with Michael Cole there in the ring to do the interview with them, and Michael sounded quite meek. Shawn had to tell him to relax. I thought that was hilarious, but then they gave Michael Cole a wedgie to welcome him to the WWF, and I couldn't help but think about Joe's comments about this being a 9th grade boys' locker room. Like, how more blatantly clear does it need to be there? But once Shawn got down to business, he was calling out The Undertaker's loss at the Hell in a Cell, and he nailed this. This was one of the better Shawn Michaels promos in recent memory. Shawn passes the mic to Triple H, and thank Christ, not the blue blood anymore. This was Triple H's voice, and I was so grateful for it. By the way, the abuse of Michael Cole, that continued throughout this. He was being tossed between Chyna and Triple H. He ended up with something stuck in his ear. I couldn't quite see what.
Getting the noogie.
By the time Shawn tried to cue up a video, Michael Cole was able to escape, but rather than show the footage from Bad Blood like what was insinuated there in the ring, a video of the curtain call appeared on the screen. They even cited the date and location and named Razor and Big Daddy Cool Diesel, as well as themselves, up there on the Titantron as they all joined up and hugged. And then they made an overly dramatic show of saying, "But I was a good guy. No, I was a bad guy." And talked to Vince, called Vince an ass. Vince appeared to be very uncomfortable during all of this. Vince says, "We've had enough. Let's go to break." And we did, and we came back to Shawn still rambling, but then the Hart Foundation music hit. I laughed when Shawn said to Vince, "You thought you were burying yourself before. You're really burying yourself when you bring that out here." Popped. I have to admit I popped for that. Bret goes straight to it. He calls Michaels a disgrace, saying, "Spare me your cheers," whenever people tried to cheer him for it. But then he calls Michaels and Triple H both homos. Oh, saying Shawn must have barebacked his way into some main events, and I fucking popped, because you know who he was barebacking to get there.
Yeah.
Vince, not Sonny, in case anybody's thinking I'm trying to be clever there. I meant Vince. Bret says without the title, Shawn would be nothing, and actually starts to get the crowd behind him. Eventually, Bret challenges Triple H to a match tonight. Shawn had 2 words for Bret, those being "suck it." For the first time ever, the "suck it" with the crotch chop. Shawn also calls Bret a paper champion, and damn, that was stiff. Oof. But this is where Shawn kind of started to go off the rails. He was rambling a little bit. Things kind of wound down. We'll have more to come in terms of the response to Brian Pillman, and there's also a lumberjack match coming up, but we're going to pause it here. So I just want to say to our listeners, first off, this was an extremely long segment. It was legitimately the first 20 minutes of the episode. I checked to see So I'm leaving out a ton of detail there. But man, what a way to kick things off. I think the most telling thing about all of it was the relative silence from commentary, with the occasional exception of Vince. I mean, JR didn't speak. The King didn't speak. We got glimpses of their facial expressions, though, and it was just very curious, the looks on their faces when you could catch it. Joe, please, I've been looking forward to what you thought of the way we opened it up tonight.
Well, I'm going to miss Brian Pillman, that's for sure. We've covered some pretty good stuff from him. Vince announcing it is just, I don't know. It's like they do one extreme sleaze thing and then they make up for it later and then do it again. It's just so weird that he says he was found dead in a hotel room. Like, why can't you just say, rest in peace, Brian? Let's do 10 bell salute. But yeah, I'm going to miss covering him. He gave us some really good moments. And then we get into this long, drawn out segment. We're getting some fallout here from Hell in a Cell. Shawn Michaels did win the match, so he's coming out and bragging about it and acting like a schoolyard bully with Triple H. Michael Cole is an extreme pencil neck geek. During this time, my God, he had to weigh like 110 pounds max.
That guy's a real badass.
The wedgie was a little outdated, but I did like the headlocks that Triple H was putting him in and giving him the noogies and stuff. I thought that was kind of funny. But they're calling themselves the Clique still. They're not really fully there with DX. We'll get to that later. But I noticed they were doing the X high five, I guess you can call it, where they cross their arms. And doing that, so they're getting there. But yeah, this was really long, and things got really weird with Vince too. That just didn't. Yeah, I was a little confused by the curtain call footage. It just seemed like it was thrown in there just to kind of stir up some trouble. I'm sure Jim Cornette and Jim Ross probably fucking hated that they did that. It's just not right. But Bret comes out, he's calling them homos, he's referring to China as a guy, because he kept saying there's two guys behind you, talking about Triple H and China. These guys, Shawn and Bret, they're just going to keep poking each other to see how far can I go, is what it seems like here. So it's interesting to watch, but it did go a little too long, and Shawn was definitely rambling at the end there after Bret was gone. He was looking at the ramp too, almost like he was waiting for a cue of some sort. But I don't know. I thought it had bits and pieces that were good, but it did go a little too long, I think.
Starting with Brian Pillman, this part was pretty short. We'll probably have a lot more to talk about a little later in the episode, both in disgusting use of Brian Pillman's death, as well as a decent segment as well. But that's later. Here we just got the 10 bell as we expected. Shawn Michaels, Triple H in China, Joe, as you said, they came out and they're still calling themselves the Clique here. They say that a few different times, so they're not fully calling themselves DX yet, but we did get the suck it term and the motion, so we're definitely heading there pretty soon. I laughed my ass off over Michael Cole just getting bullied out here. His initiation, as they called it, giving him a wedgie. I thought that was some pretty good shit. Shawn Michaels, we get a good look at that gash on his forehead, and that thing goes from like his hairline down to his nose. I mean, I'll give him a little bit of credit. During that Hell in the Cell match, he took a hell of a bump, and he had to get a few stitches there. When they decided to show the curtain call footage, I don't know, either Vince was really acting well or he didn't know they were going to show this, because he did really look pissed over them showing this, because I know there was a point, especially at the beginning of DX, where Vince kind of was upset over the fact that they were losing to Nitro every week, and he kind of said, hey, the hands are off, do whatever you want. So I wonder if that's what happened here, and Vince wasn't aware he was going to use this, but they did, and after it, they were, yucking it up, saying, oh, but I was a bad guy and you were a good guy. That whole thing. It was entertaining, but everyone at ringside looked very uncomfortable about it. Once Bret Hart came out here, he was giving a pretty good promo, and then he drops the both of you are homo lines, and wow, did that feel like it was 1997 when he said that, It's just definitely a product of the time that outside of that, it was a pretty good promo where he challenges Triple H, and we get Vince McMahon. He uses the Triple H name tonight too, so that's official. He's Triple H now, so that's kind of cool. Later on, we'll see just HHH on the placard that comes up with his name, so he is full-on Triple H now. After the Hart Foundation was done, it goes back to Shawn, and this is definitely where it started to go off the rails or just go a little bit too long. JR even makes a good comment saying, is this a debate? Because it was just going back and forth and back and forth. So if they could have shortened it up, I think it could have hit a little harder. It wasn't bad. There was some good stuff here. It just was a little too long-winded.
Yeah, 100% agreed on that. And I really don't think that any of them knew that curtain call video was coming. The tell for me was Lawler's face. Lawler, he always has that shit-eating grin. He always has the twinkle in his eye. He's always looks like he has a comment up his sleeve, but he was just stone-faced throughout that entire segment. He didn't have anything to say about it until well afterwards. Him and JR both were talking about it, but it's almost like they had to wait and see what the direction was from Vince before they would comment on it, because they sure as shit didn't comment on it in the moment. So, Really interesting.
It's just not right.
It's not. Well, something else that just isn't right. Our next match. The Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher, defeat the Godwins, Henry and Phineas, with Uncle Cletus by pinfall in 4 minutes and 18 seconds in a lumberjack match. When's the last time we saw a fucking lumberjack match? Man.
I couldn't tell you.
The Headbangers, as well as the Lumberjacks, were already out when we came back from a commercial break. And part of the Lumberjacks were LOD. So, of course, LOD crowd chant got going on for, the team that isn't in the ring. There were a lot of interesting faces there in the Lumberjack line. People that we haven't seen in a while. We had the new Blackjacks there. Billy Gunn was there. The Sultan. Double J Jesse James. Flash Funk. And the Truth Commission without the Commandant. A fourth person that was unnamed and kind of hiding behind the ring post there. But this match is where commentary was going to take the time to talk about everything else other than the match. The King here is where he ends up picking at Vince about Shawn Michaels and what they did, trying to get Vince to fire people. And that was it in this match for me. It was, pointless clusterfuck like most of the tag team matches are right now. I wish I could say differently, but here we are. Joe, what'd you think of the lumberjack match we had here?
Oh, I already forgot that the Godwins were tag team champions. They just won them the night before, right? From the Headbangers. And here we are putting the title back on the Headbangers. So not sure what the point of that is. I did get a kick out of the crowd surfing at the beginning and Vince giving his belly laugh during that. I did think that was kind of funny. But yeah, the match wasn't anything great. I mean, there was some chaos in the ring there with everybody coming in, and then obviously the referee is distracted by that and never saw it. But this match was just what you would expect, just silly goofiness, and they changed the title.
There was no title change.
Yeah, this was a non-title match.
Okay. Yeah. My bad. I mean, that shows you how much I actually cared about it, so.
Yeah.
Well, it's, no surprise, Joe, that you didn't know or remember if it was a title match, because to start this match off, the crowd was chanting for LOD.
Yeah.
A team that isn't involved in this match. And by not involved, I mean they're not even two of the lumberjacks at ringside here.
They were.
They were?
They were. Yeah.
Oh, I thought they just came out later.
No.
They were out. Whatever. I mean, if
we
you
really don't give a shit about this
Yeah.
match.
I mean, if the crowd is chanting for a team that isn't involved in the actual match, you done lost. You lost the crowd. You lost everyone. And the first lumberjacks to get involved is the fucking Truth Commission. I mean, if you really want me to get pissed, get them involved early, you know? I mean, Godwins and Headbangers, they're solid workers, but a lumberjack match where we focus on nothing and one of those lumberjacks is the fucking Sultan? You lost me. You completely lost me. You lost me. You lost the crowd. They were happy once LOD started to interrupt, but that's it.
Yeah.
The crowd wants to see LOD, and that's it. Pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame either of you for getting stuff wrong on this because it was an afterthought. It's an afterthought to me now. It's apparently an afterthought to the people in the ring. It's an afterthought to, the whole tag division is an afterthought to whoever's doing the booking here. It screams, we don't know what we're doing and we don't care to fix it. The whole thing. I fucking hate it. All right, let's move it along. Vince tells us here there's going to be an interview with Melanie Pillman later. I hope that's tasteful, Yeah. Also, don't forget, later on tonight, we're going to get Bret Hart versus Triple H. I am looking forward to that. And we're also going to be getting a, quote, diatribe from Jim Cornette tonight, which I was very excited to hear. That's something that I distinctly remember from back in the day. And what was not exciting, however, was seeing Los Barrique was Miguel Perez front and center, hair erupting up from within his shirt. It was barely contained, saying that he'll be taking on Marc Mero. And that is what takes us into our next match. Marc Mero, with Sable, defeats Miguel Perez by pinfall in 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Sable didn't look any more natural here than she ever has, and by that, I could, be talking about her total lack of charisma, her bolt-ons, many other things, take your pick, but there's not a natural thing about her.
She's got a sex toy whip with her now.
Yeah, she doesn't even spin it right.
No.
God damn.
Like a robot.
Terrible.
Is this how I use this?
Marc Mero, though, he has a new look. He's all in black. He's got a head shaved. He's wearing TKO shorts. This is the Mero that I remember the most, really working the boxer angle here. I remember him more in red shorts as opposed to black, but the match gets going. Stuff happens. Mero also debuts his new finisher on Miguel. He calls that, or JR, calls that the TKO, which was a decent-looking move, but I doubt he's going to be using it on anyone heavier than Miguel Perez. And I did laugh towards the end where things were getting wrapped up. King said that Mero had better not get rid of his meal ticket, Sable. That was it for this match for me. I have to say that 2.5 minutes I thought was just right for this because this Marc Mero looked much, much better than whatever the hell that wild man shit was before, especially with the change in his work style. There were no high-flying moves here. This was punches, this was power moves, and so far, at least, I find that I greatly prefer this Marc Mero as opposed to the old one. Maybe, and this is just that old optimism of mine breaking through, maybe he won't be quite as much of a chore to watch as he was before. Ryan, what'd you think of this match?
Well, Marc Mero is back, and now he's got his boxer gimmick, and I guess good for him, he's got his own music now. He's not coming out to the Sable music. It's music with like a hard riff or a hard rock riff to it. It sounded actually pretty good. And with that change, a complete new look. He's got a buzz cut and he's not jumping around like a dipshit anymore. He's just being a boxer. And I love the King questioning, why is he just a boxer all of a sudden? And Vince basically is like, shut the fuck up, just roll with it, bro. And JR chimes in and gives some background to Mero's boxing history, trying to lend some legitimacy to this gimmick. But this may sound ridiculous, but Bartlett, I agree with you. This is a much, much better gimmick for Marc Mero. I don't want to jump to any conclusions here, but he's not trying to pull off any of these high-flying moves that he was never able to do convincingly. He's just acting like a boxer, and it's a little more believable, and he looks a little better doing it. So he's heads above better than he was before he blew his knee out. I'm not going to get my hopes up too much, but it's more promising than we've ever seen him, that's for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the crowd sure is happy that Sable is back, too.
Yeah.
So not so much Marc Mero, but they're happy to see Sable again. But yeah, this gimmick change is a million times better. I won't say that I love it, but I mean, the change is better. And credit to Marc Mero because that's probably not an easy thing to do. It's quite a change. Going from the stupid wild man, what's it, Little Richard lookalike type thing, to this boxer guy that's more of a shoot style gimmick. So kudos to him for being able to make that work after dealing with a knee injury for the past several months.
Yeah, I'm maintaining just a faint optimism there. Especially once he gets Jackie. I remember him being much more entertaining once his whole plot line got going. But, I mean, we'll see. I could totally have rose-colored glasses on for that. Somebody that doesn't have rose-colored glasses on for damn near anything is Jim Cornette. And he was going to be on our screens here next. And they had to give a brief disclaimer. The views of Jim Cornette are not those of anyone else but him. There on the screen, old Jimmy. Cornette goes off on the NWO, and he was going lightning fast in that style that is uniquely Jim Cornette's. So fast that it's basically impossible for me to pin down specific quotes. But just speaking broadly, Cornette names Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. He spends a large amount of time on Eric Bischoff. I thought it was very ironic that he notably left out Hulk Hogan in any of his critiques there.
The contract is coming up.
Yeah. And just kind of, he did his Cornette thing. He unloaded all of his opinions, rapid fire. It was all very clever, I thought. And once it was all done, all the King could say was, wow. And I thought that was pretty funny. Somebody like the King being left speechless. So, guys, like I said, Cornette was going a mile a minute with this. So while my breakdown of it is short, that doesn't necessarily mean that this was a short segment. This was, more girthy than I would make it seem. And I would encourage anybody to go back and watch it if you're interested. But with that being said, Ryan, what'd you think of this candid soliloquy from Jim Cornette?
It was kind of interesting. I mean, it's very fitting for Jim Cornette, what he was saying here, but I think this is the first time we got a segment like this out of Jim Cornette. He's usually just being a manager or a ringside personality. So that was kind of interesting. And he starts it off with praising a couple WCW guys, Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. I mean, he includes Mankind in that, but I thought that was interesting that was allowed. And he starts diving into, at the time, I think would be considered facts that only smart fans would know. He's using terms like the WWF pushed Kevin Nash to the moon and he didn't have any loyalty. He left for WCW for more money, making fun of the moveset that Kevin Nash had. He's using everyone's real name. He's not using any gimmick names here. So they're trying to make this a shoot interview. I mean, it's a worked shoot interview, I guess, the style they're doing it. At one point, he even calls Eric Bischoff a mark, which is almost breaking kayfabe at that point, term to be using. So very interesting. Another point, it felt like Cornette was maybe talking directly to me. He was saying, read the credits at the end of a WCW pay-per-view if you can get one for free. And yes, I did. Thank you very much. Thanks to that old trusty cheater box. And then he ends the segment again praising Arn Anderson and Ric Flair. Cactus Jack again, but it made me wonder if Arn Anderson and Ric Flair's contracts were up and he was trying to sweet talk them a little bit to see if they could maybe take a switch. But I don't know. He did a good job here, and Cornette, every time he's spitting fire, he could do that with the best of them. So I'm interested to see where things go with these What Grinds Jim Cornette's Gears segment. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, there's going to be more of these, but this one here, I was getting a little bit of old man yelling at clouds vibes a little bit. And it kind of made me want to watch Nitro. So I don't know. I will give credit, though, that this is very unique. This is something that we have not seen on Raw up to this point or anything close to it. Do you guys know the little origin story of this and how this happened?
I do not know.
Because I've heard Jim Cornette talk about it. I guess, do you remember that the WWF had it was an AOL show called Bite This?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s at this time. Mm-hmm. Jim Cornette apparently went on that show and basically did this. And Vince saw it and just basically said, I love it. I want you to do it on Raw. So that's how this got on That's how they got this on Raw, and there's going to be a few more of these, I think. So it's interesting to me that they're just all out mentioning things about WCW guys. It's just very odd. And I did read in the Observer that Dave Meltzer said something about, it's obviously the WWF is trying to get more edgy, and McMahon wants to have a harder edge product where he publicly comes out swinging against the competition. That's probably part of the reason for this. That's probably part of the reason for that curtain call stuff that we saw earlier. We can probably expect more of that moving forward.
Well, it's certainly better than the billionaire Ted segments.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah, really. Talk about passive-aggressive bullshit there. All right. Well, let's go now to our next match. The British Bulldog with the Hart Foundation. That's Bret, Owen, and the Anvil, and the Anvil's goatee. Defeat Rocky Maivia with the Nation of Domination. That's D'Lo Brown, Kama Mustafa, and Farouk by pinfall in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Vince said during the Hart Foundation's entrance that Brian Pillman was conspicuous in his absence. What a fucking moron. I don't think that means what you think it means, Vince. Rocky was fast in this match at the start, so fast that I was worrying about the Bulldog's ability to keep up with him. That was unfounded, though. I'm not sure if the Bulldogs sped up or Rocky slowed down, but Rocky ended up giving an unnamed people's elbow at one point in this, going into a pinning attempt. That was only a 2 count, so it didn't get any kind of fanfare, but it was that overly dramatic, overly sold, overly worked elbow that becomes the people's elbow. The Bulldog ended up winning with a power slam. When the Hart Foundation climbed in the ring to celebrate, Farouk came at them with a whip. And just started whipping the shit out of everyone.
It's Sable's whip.
I laughed at how hard and fast he was going
just
at it. He
ferociously beating them.
Any lick he could get in on any skin in front of him, he was going for it. That was broken up by officials, and the final note here was highlighting how much of a feud there is now, I guess, between Farouk and Owen because of their IC title skirmish at Bad Blood. So, I glossed over the action here because there's really not a whole lot to say specifically about it, but I really enjoyed this match. I was worried at the start of things about the Bulldog keeping up, but that was unfounded again. Rocky looked great, the Bulldog looked great working with him, and I was entertained throughout this entire match. Joe, what did you think of this?
Yeah, I think maybe at the time it probably wouldn't have been something that was so great, but I guess rewatching it, like you said, there were a couple things that were pretty cool. That people's elbow. He even did the little thing where he kicks the guy's arm over before he does it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. I totally didn't expect that this early in The Rock's career, so that was cool to see. And Farouk just, again, ferociously beating the shit out of the Harts with that leather strap was fun to see. That's what you watch wrestling for, actual fights. People beating each other up, and he was not holding back. So that was cool.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was great to see The Rock start this match off against Bulldog, and I'm just going to call him The Rock now. They're still calling him Rocky and Rocky Maivia, but he looks and moves like The Rock now in the ring. So
yeah,
that's what I'm going to call him. And I thought him and the Bulldog really worked good together. I mean, everything was pulled off very convincingly. It was entertaining throughout the entire match. Really no boring parts at all.
Right.
I enjoyed myself. The only part that stuck out to me a little bit was Vince showing his age and, more ignorant than racist. But when talking about the Nation of Domination, he said, these guys are really well-spoken and well-educated.
Oh, my God.
It was just like, Jesus Christ, Vince.
What a fucking shithead he was on this entire episode.
He was just one step away from saying they're a credit to their race.
Yes. Yeah. That stuck out to me. But Rocky, he's really working his way out of the basement at this point. The crowd was literally calling for his death a few months ago, but he's doing a good job of that. And this was a really solid match that was entertaining from both guys.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And it was a heck of a way to end the first hour of Raw. That's what took us into that bridging promo. You know, we started the second hour with a commercial for the Bad Blood Encore, and that was something that was just, you know, getting thrown at us here and there throughout the night. It's to be expected the day after, but, you know, we got a whole host of still shots putting that over. But then the glass breaks and business picks up as Stone Cold comes down to the ring to work the corners. And we're to the point now where every corner Stone Cold hits, there is an explosion of camera flashes. And, you know, that's something that I don't think has really been happening up to this point. It's been kind of getting there, but between that, I mean, they make mention of all of the signs in the crowd. It's really, really, really catching fire for Stone Cold now.
He's a bona fide phenomenon at this point.
Yeah. Vince was there in the ring waiting for Austin to find out Austin's decision, and it was immediately entertaining. Jim Ross said, "Vince is not having a great time in Kansas City." Between Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Vince was just eating shit all night with these people. The bottom line to all of this is that Austin isn't doing anything without the guarantee of an IC title shot against Owen Hart. He refuses to look at anything, sign anything, unless he sees that IC title shot in writing. And it's at about that time that Farouk showed up on the Titantron to address Steve Austin's, quote, honky ass. I popped. Remember that Austin is who robbed Farouk of the IC title at Bad Blood. Farouk goes off with his bottom line saying that Austin's ass belongs to Farouk. Austin said that as soon as he gets his paperwork signed, he'll beat the hell out of every single member of the Nation of Domination, and I fucking popped again. The crowd popped. Everybody popped for it, and that's pretty much the end of it. I mean, Austin, you know, works the corners again. He goes around and intimidates the commentary table. He takes the king's crown up into the ring and punts it into the crowd again. Popped again.
You know, he did play football in high school and college.
And this whole segment kind of this whole segment kind of changes gears at the very end. Finishes up with Hawk of the Legion of Doom giving a quick promo to hype his upcoming match against Owen Hart. He basically says that Owen is a loogie in the back of his throat and it needs to be hawked up. Yeah. And I fucking popped. My God. So guys, you know, for me at least, this episode has mostly been delivering. There were a couple stutter steps with some of those earlier matches, but of course, when Austin kicks off the second hour, you know it's going to get the energy levels up, and Hawk, for me, was just a cherry on top. Joe, what did you think of Austin, Farouk, and Hawk here?
Well, one thing when I was reading the Brian Pillman tribute from Dave Meltzer, he pointed out that the chain that Austin wears around his neck was a gift given to him by Brian Pillman. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Steve's wearing that chain in the ring here. I loved when he demanded his title shot in writing to Vince, saying that, you know, handshake's not going to do it. I don't trust you. Put it in writing. I popped for that. And I'm already loving this war of words between Austin and Farouk. I mean,
yeah.
And this goes to show, you know, you mentioned how you can see the increase in photo flashes there for Austin now. And he's already reached a level now, not that Farouk in the Nation is not something that's great, but you can already see Austin elevating other guys. You know, this is getting a really good response from the crowd, and it's just Farouk. It's not the WWF champion. It's just a guy that's, I wouldn't call him a mid-carder, but he's not a top guy, but
yeah,
he's almost getting a reaction as if he is when he's working with Austin already. So Austin's already kind of that guy, you know. And punting the crown was just fantastic, and Jerry Lawler really did a good job of selling that too.
Yeah, Stone Cold, you know, he comes out here and he starts the interview off telling Vince, you better made the right decision or I'm going to whip your ass. And the crowd goes crazy. And then he refuses to do anything, Bartlett, like you said, without having in writing that he gets to get his hands on Owen Hart for the IC belt. And Farouk ends up interrupting up on the Titantron. And I love this as well. You know, Farouk calling Austin a honky. But once Austin comes back, he says, after I sign this, I'll kick every one of your asses. It ain't a race thing. It ain't a color thing. It's a me kicking your ass thing. And what a perfect thing to say. And then to end it, just punting the King's crown into the crowd. Whoever caught it, put it on, and they put the camera zoomed in on him. I mean, yeah, we've talked about Stone Cold for months, almost a year at this point, but the motherfucker is one of the most entertaining guys in the ring. And he got everyone having a good time. The crowd, me, hilarious segment.
It's all live too. That makes it even more impressive.
And then Hawk, the loogie.
Disgusting.
Yeah, the loogie was pretty great. Bartley, you didn't do it justice. He actually cleared his throat and made the sound when talking about it. Disgusting as fuck. Way to go, Hawk.
You're like a loogie in the larynx. Love it when they pull out the anatomy there. All right, let's go now to our next match. Owen Hart defeats Road Warrior Hawk by pinfall in 3 minutes and 22 seconds to retain the WWF Intercontinental title. Owen starts this off on the microphone saying that he can't wait for Austin to be back. And that actually, it got me wondering. I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but, we did mention back whenever Austin's neck first got broken, how there was that little bit of backstage drama between the two of them. Owen didn't come forward right away to apologize, and there was that tension between the two of them. And they wound up, using it here for the story. But it just, how long did that tension last? They're challenging each other, they're talking to each other, they're going to be working with each other again, and it makes me wonder.
My understanding is it was never resolved. Stone Cold did not go to Owen Hart's funeral, so I don't think it was ever resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like when he talks about it, he doesn't say it in a hateful way or anything either. It's very respectful.
Yeah.
But JR has said that, he talked to Owen about it, and Owen was just so embarrassed and humiliated that it happened. And that's why he was not apologizing.
But I think ultimately with Stone Cold, that is what always kind of sat in his craw, is he never got an apology from Owen over it. And yeah, Owen had his reasons, but it doesn't sound like anything was ever really resolved there, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it's a testament to the professionalism of both of them that they can still keep working like this together, opposite of each other, I should say, whenever that tension is there, getting over that for the sake of the story.
I guess a good contrast is Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Those guys hate each other and refuse to work with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then here's an actual life and death situation that caused this rift, and yet they could put it aside and fucking work in the ring.
Yeah. Well, back in the ring, once the action got going, Hawk was dominantly in control at the starts, but not long into it, the Godwins showed up with the assumption that they were there to mess with Hawk. There was some attempted interference by the Godwins that drew out Animal, and then some more somewhat confusing interference that ultimately gave Owen Hart the victory. And that's it. I have to admit that I was not impressed with any of this. I hate to say that about Owen Hart, hate to say that about Hawk. I mean, more so about Owen, but I think I might be beyond giving any kind of a shit that ties back into the Godwins now. It's been beaten out of me. The caring and optimism have been beaten out of me over weeks and weeks and weeks. So, Ryan, what'd you think of this match?
Unfortunately, it follows the trend of anything that has to do with the IC belt and us just not, it's like it's become the new tag team belts. We just don't give a shit about it. And every match, the focus is on something else other than the actual title match. And that's what happens here. Owen and Road Warrior Hawk, you would think, could put up a good match. And I think if we just let them work, maybe they would. But interruptions with the Godwins and Uncle Cletus, almost immediate. Just another questionable IC title match.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, you're putting Hawk in there in a singles match, so I'm already kind of not really interested. The Godwins, at this point, like if the WWF is going with a more harder edge product, I think they need to give the Godwins some kind of makeover, Marc Mero style gimmick change or something. I think it's wore out its welcome at this point for me. The highlight here, though, is that Vince left commentary. The reason for his leaving commentary is not a highlight, but really, really great banter between the King and Jim Ross. someone took a kick to the nuts, and Jim Ross says he called it a kick to parts unknown, which I thought was fantastic. So that was the highlight of this match. But the real story here is Owen Hart and Steve Austin, and this was just kind of a match that's thrown in there until we get there.
Slapdash. And it's, like you said, Joe, it was great that Vince left, but not great because of what he was leaving to do, which is interview Melanie Pillman, the wife of Brian Pillman.
24 hours.
Slightly over. I was thinking of it as less than 48, but slightly over 24 is just as accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Vince started this in split screen. Vince was in the studio and Melanie was there in her living room, that same living room where Pillman's Got a Gun happened. Vince asks Melanie to end the speculation about substance consumption that Vince, created at the pay-per-view last night. Melanie says that, it boils down to being a heart attack that Pillman died from in his sleep in bed. Vince continued to push about Pillman's use of prescribed medications. That's before Vince makes sure to bring up the children and how they reacted to their father's death. Vince then asks Melanie what she plans to do now that she's a single parent. She responds saying she doesn't even know what day it is. Vince finally asked how Melanie would like Brian to be remembered, and she says that, among other things, Brian loved the business, he died for the business, and she hopes no one else will have to die. That interview was followed by a biopic video package narrated by Jim Ross, with some very, very poignant comments by Jim Ross and the King following that. So, less than 48 hours, like we were saying, after the death of Brian Pillman, Vince interviews his widow. I think this was extremely tasteless. I think that it got right up to and included some cruelty. And I'll leave it at that. Ryan, what did you think about this interview with Melanie Pillman?
I mean, Jesus Christ, you have to be kidding me that Vince McMahon had this interview just over 24 hours after her husband dies for a ratings push. I mean, what a fucking son of a bitch. I mean, what else can you really say about the guy? You know, he immediately starts in bringing up when a 35-year-old man dies, there's a great amount of speculation. And she tries to cut it off saying, no, it appears to be a heart issue, not drugs. But no, Vince wouldn't give it up. He immediately started back on the speculation about prescription painkillers. And, I'm not going to say really a single thing about what Melanie had to say because this was so soon after her death as they zoom in on her crying face. I can't really comment on what she said, but this is an all-time low for Vince McMahon in the WWF. And then he brings up, what are you and your family going to do? How are you going to support your children? I don't know, Vince. Maybe take that death grip off your fucking wallet and throw a little money towards a struggling family whose father just died. I don't know, maybe. But no, he's going to play it up for fucking views here. What a fucking piece of trash.
It's pretty well known that Vince McMahon is a flaming asshole, and that's probably why he allowed people like Shawn Michaels to act like a flaming asshole all the time. And I mean, this is the worst thing that we've seen on Raw since we started watching this. From my understanding, Brian Pillman had a heart attack, and he had taken some painkillers, which caused him to not wake up while he had the heart attack, and that's how he died. But Brian Pillman had, what did they say, 30 throat surgeries when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His first wife killed herself,
Yep.
Who he had kids with. He was in a Humvee accident that he was unrecognizable when people would visit him in the hospital. I mean, he's on painkillers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he had a heart attack. This is just Vince. Yeah, you're right, Ryan. He's trying to push ratings as if he's some kind of credible news outlet. This almost came off as like a fucking Larry King or something like that. But he's also protecting his ass. by saying, like, he probably heard there was a bottle of pills in the hotel room and decided, well, I need to protect my business here and be a total complete asshole and do this. So that's really unfortunate. From what I understand too, Brian Pillman and Melanie were not even together anymore when this happened. So, Melanie I've heard interviews with Brian Jr. where he says that she just wanted a payday. But either way, they shouldn't have done this. Yeah. Just give her the money and don't do this. But thank Friar Ferguson that JR gave us a classier tribute to Brian.
Yeah.
Saying that Brian Pillman's legacy of courage will live forever, which is just so true. And, some heartfelt words from Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler to kind of, I guess, not make up for it, but at least give us something good about Brian Pillman here.
I forgot to talk about the JR voiceover video montage. It really was. This was the perfect tribute that we should have had for
the only
Pillman.
One.
Yeah,
right.
it talked about his struggles as a child, how he overcame them, how he became a professional football player. This was the perfect story, not that disgusting interview. And after the video, it was a really rare moment. We got to see the King, especially breaking kayfabe. He's not giving his over cartoony voice. He's just saying that us fans didn't know Brian like they did, and that he will be greatly missed. So that was a touching moment, and that's all we should have had.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Let's just move away from it, because like I said, it just tasteless and cruel. So let's go now to our next match. The Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff, versus the Truth Commission. Recon and Sniper ends in a no contest before it could even get started. And Ryan, Matt and Jeff Hardy, they've both been jobbers of the week, haven't they?
They have. Matt Hardy was our jobber of the week back on our January 9th, 1995 episode. And Jeff Hardy was our jobber back on the July 3rd, 1995 episode. So if anyone is interested in listening to those segments, there's what to look for.
Hopefully by this point in 1997, they've gotten out from under the wing of Gary Sabaw.
I believe they have.
and of legal age to wrestle.
Yes.
And finally, yes. So, as I said, the Truth Commission didn't even get a chance to get out here. The Hardys were in the ring, ready to go. But before Truth Commission could come out, Kane and Paul Bearer came on down. JR gave us that classic hellfire and brimstone line. Kane cleared the ring. He ended up throwing Jeff onto Matt at the outside. I don't think they were ready for that because they both hit pretty fucking hard. Paul Bearer cuts a promo then on The Undertaker as a way of leading into Kane's formal introduction, as well as the expected hype that he's putting out there surrounding the circumstances of the new feud that we've got going on here. And that's more or less where this segment wound up. So while it wasn't exactly the in-ring debut of the Hardy Boys as a tag team, it also wasn't exactly the in-ring debut of Kane either. It was kind of just somewhere in between. Joe, what did you have on this segment?
I mean, if anyone's rewatching these with us, I mean, this one just gives you all kinds of nostalgia pops, you know?
Yeah.
It's the next day after Kane appeared.
Yep.
And it's just really, really great. You know, that's something they could easily ruin and mess up, but they did not. This was very well done. JR saying the hellfire and brimstone, and then he did the surprised, oh God, when the fireworks go off. Just beautiful. And great job by the Hardy Boys here too. Fantastic promo by Paul Bearer too. He's not being comical or goofy. He's acting as the guy who gets picked on and now who's going to pick on him because he has this monster as protection. You know, just comes off very legitimate. You know, he's not managing Vader or some other random guy. So Paul Bearer really does an incredible job at selling this monster gimmick of Kane.
You know, before the Hardy Boys got a proper debut, they're going to job out one more time here as Kane's music hits.
One more time.
That's
one
right.
More time.
Kane's music hits. Kane, Paul Bearer make their way down. And I talked about earlier, they were our Jobber of the Weeks already from singles competition. And I'm really happy that they already got that because they both got jobbed out here hard as Kane just double goozles them for the ultimate jobber debut. And then Kane picks up Jeff and just tosses him at Matt like a rag doll. What an amazing, vulgar display of power. Just fantastic. I guess not debut of Kane, but introduction of him. You know, Kane as a 41-year-old man still looks absolutely intimidating and terrifying in the ring. He is an imposing figure out there. And you guys talked about JR throwing out the hellfire and brimstone. Also at the end, he pulls out the straight from the depths of hell just JR is so fucking amazing, who just adds to this introduction of Kane. I loved everything about this, and what a way to make Kane look strong as fuck. You know, he just destroyed The Undertaker. Now he comes out here and he's dishing out double goozles.
Yeah, Joe, I think you put it best. Nostalgia. A lot of nostalgia here, you know. Our first view of the Hardy Boys as a tag team, our first goozle from Kane, Jeff Hardy's first concussion there on the ramp.
Oh, my God.
Oh, that was not his first.
Yeah, he's been wrestling since he's like 10 years old.
Right.
For Gary Sabol.
His first televised concussion.
Right, there you go.
All right, so let's keep it going now to our final match of the night. Triple H with Chyna defeats Bret Hart by countout in 10 minutes and 30 seconds. I can't wait for Hunter to drop the music and the robe and the weird pirate pants that he wears out. He's given up all the rest of it. That needs to go next. Bret Hart, he came out alone. That made me assume that we'd end up in a clusterfuck later on. At the start, Bret was working hard. Bret was looking better in the first 30 seconds of this match than he had in the last half dozen matches he's been in against like the Patriot or Vader or who the fuck ever.
Wonder why that is.
Yeah. I loved Vince saying that it's Triple H that's a bad influence on Shawn. You know, because that's why Shawn's being a dick, because he's hanging out with Triple H.
He sounded like an oblivious parent trying to defend their high school child. It's who he's hanging out with. That's not who he is.
Shawn did end up coming down to distract Bret. He was standing there shoving the Canadian flag up his nose. A moment later after that, the Bulldog, Owen, and the Anvil, as well as the Anvil's goatee, started to work their way down. That was going into a commercial break. And when we came back, things hadn't exploded yet, but felt like we were building to it. The action, though, in the ring stayed solid. Not surprising from either of these two. I was pretty happy that the interference had been kept to an absolute minimum up to that point. I loved Bret Hart no-selling the forearm from Chyna. That just feels like such a Bret Hart thing to do. I'm not going to sell for that bionic woman. But that is what set up the sweet chin music from Shawn Michaels that put Bret to the floor at the outside. Supposedly, there was some contribution from Rick Rude in that whole scenario, but I didn't see it. That sweet chin music and laying Bret out is what gave Triple H the count-out victory as we faded to black. I have to admit, guys, I was surprised that there was not a clusterfuck in the ring. I guess I'm just so used to having it be the end of the show, you know, but I thought this was a fantastic match. I felt it did a really good job of capitalizing on the story going on here between Shawn and Bret. Joe, what'd you think of this match and the way that Raw ended tonight?
Yeah, we are on the way to the screw job. So that's what we're getting here. And it's all pretty good stuff for the most part. One thing you mentioned Rick Rude. You know, I read in the Observer, and I think I reported it, that Shawn Michaels did not want Rick Rude as his bodyguard. He wanted Helmsley, and that's kind of what, you know, they wanted to do their own thing. And it's really obvious on screen. Like, Rick Rude just does not fit in.
Yeah. He's an afterthought.
Even when they made their entrance earlier tonight, he wasn't even with them. He came out later. I don't know. It's more glaringly obvious every week, I think, with this DX group that's not quite called DX yet. That's the other thing, too. It's kind of, when I'm watching this, for some reason I have in my brain that this kind of just like happened overnight, but it didn't. It's really a slower burn than I thought with the formation of DX. But yeah, this was a pretty good match. It's Triple H and Bret Hart, so it's going to be pretty good. And then, of course, the distraction from China is great, as it always is. And setting up that sweet chin music was, again, just on the road to the screw job. So all really good stuff and a good finish to the show.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing I found a little bit odd, Bret Hart, when he comes out with the Canadian flag, it seems like no one really cares anymore. Especially because he's going up against Shawn Michaels now, who's an even more hated person at the current time. So that's really kind of killed the heat that Bret Hart has had as heel. And my understanding is that is another Shawn Michaels thing that happened, was after he saw all of the success Bret Hart was having as a heel, he went to Vince McMahon and said, I want that, just like everything he says with Bret Hart. So it really is a shame that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels could not just learn to fucking work in the ring with each other. I mean, we touched on it just a little bit ago, but if they could have, who the fuck knows what we could have had in the ring if they just could have put this backstage drama bullshit aside. But they couldn't, and we're going to see the climax of that here very soon, unfortunately. But this match between Bret Hart and Triple H, it was very good. I, too, Bartlett, just like you, was expecting a clusterfuck, but we got a pretty damn good match between the two guys here. So even when the people came down to ringside, thankfully, the focus stayed on the match and not at them. So we did ultimately get a little bit of distraction to cause the end of this and the count-out victory for Triple H, but all around a pretty damn good match, I gotta say.
Yeah, completely agreed, and a much better way to end the episode than we've been getting lately. Yeah, as I said, we faded to black, so let's take it on over to highlights and lowlights. Ryan, why don't you take that first?
Well, highlight, I feel like there were a few highlights tonight, but I'm going to go with my personal bias here and go with Kane coming out and just destroying the Hardy Boys. It was a really great introduction to Kane. It made him look like an absolute powerhouse and an actual threat to The Undertaker like we've never seen before. So I'm pumped for things moving forward with that, as I think no one would be surprised about with me being an asshole for The Undertaker. My low light is Vince McMahon, just Vince McMahon, and the way he exploited Melanie Pillman so soon after Brian Pillman's death. Absolutely disgusting.
We are going to have the same exact highlight and low light. Ryan, I agree with your highlight, making Kane look like a very strong monster, wasting no time, trotting him out there the day after he was first debuted, and no sign of The Undertaker tonight either, which just builds that story even better. So that is my highlight. If that did not exist, you're right. There were a couple other things on this show that were pretty good highlights. So pretty good show altogether. My low light is also Vince McMahon in general, just, exploiting the death of Brian Pillman to cover his ass and also try to win in a ratings war is just sickening angle.
Yeah, we're 3 for 3 on the lowlights. Vince McMahon was my lowlight as well, as you guys have said already, just for being a fucking scumbag. I am going to differ on the highlight, though. I do agree that there were a lot of potential highlights in this episode, a whole bunch of shit that we could have picked through. But I ended up going with the way that Shawn Michaels led off this show, the whole shebang there with Triple H, the curtain call. It was very unexpected to me, and it felt so different than what we are used to in, I guess, our heels. I don't know. The line of babyface and heel is starting to get blurred for me. And that was one of the things that really interested me about that opening segment. I want to hate Shawn Michaels. I've often hated Shawn Michaels, but that time I kind of really liked Shawn Michaels. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around October 6th, 1997 for us?
I certainly do. From the Wrestling Observer, obviously the big news story is the death of Brian Pillman. A really nice article from Dave Meltzer in the Observer for anyone who wants to go read that. He had a little bit of comments on the Melanie thing. He said it just seemed way too early to do something like that, was what he was highlighting there. And he did also agree with us that the video afterwards was very nice. I'm sure he'll have more to say about that in the future. The Jim Cornette promo. Dave said he got a few laughs out of it, but cannot see the purpose of it. But like I said earlier in the show, he did mention that McMahon wants to have a harder edge product where he publicly comes out swinging against the competition. So that's the plan for Jim Cornette, to do these weekly interviews moving forward. Couple injury highlights here. We've heard about Ken Shamrock and his internal injuries that he has.
Coughing up blood.
He's got a bruised lung. He is expected to be back for house shows this weekend, though. So he's been out of action for a few weeks, but sounds like we're getting him back pretty soon. Someone that we are not getting back very soon is Mr. Injury Prone himself, Ahmed Johnson. He did have surgery on his hand and will be out for 2 to 4 weeks.
And is up to a slim 450.
And it's all just from chicken, rice, and broccoli, too. Last but not least, some good news on the injury front is that Steve Austin is scheduled to return on October 18th.
Wow.
Okay.
So
seems a little
soon, but okay.
Seems optimistic, but we'll wait and see. And that is all.
All right. Well, thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and tell all of your friends to tune in to the most degenerate Monday Night Raw review podcast on the airwaves. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on October 13th, 1997, with matches supposedly featuring Ahmed Johnson. I don't know what's going to happen there with our news this week, but we're also going to get Mosaic in action, so that'll more than make up for it, as well as many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.